I recently found a small scientific study and a qualitative research involving long term practitioners of Vishnu Sahasranam. And there are recent personal accounts from people describing what happened to them when they started reciting Vishnu Sahasranam regularly. Let me begin with the scientific study. In 2016, researchers published a paper titled Beneficial Effect of 12 Weeks Sri Vishnu Sahasranama Chanting on Stress, Cognition, and Autonomic Functions, a pilot study. The paper appeared in the International Journal of Research in Ayurveda and Pharmacy. This clinical trial involved just one participant. The participant was a 32-year-old research scholar in the health sciences. The researchers assessed his stress levels, cortisol, blood pressure, and certain aspects of cognitive function. He was first trained in the pronunciation of Vishnu Sahasranam by a Sanskrit expert. Then he began chanting the entire Vishnu Sahasranam every morning at 8 a.m. He did this for 12 weeks. Before the practice began, the researchers recorded his baseline measurements. They measured them again after 12 weeks, and some of the numbers changed quite substantially. His depression score on the DASS 42 went from 19 to 11. His anxiety score went from 15.67 to 9.67. His stress score went from 30.33 to 19. His serum cortisol went from 18.64 to 8.9 micrograms per deciliter. His systolic blood pressure went from about 139 to 120. His diastolic blood pressure went from about 95 to 77. His MMSE cognitive score also increased. The researchers therefore described the results as preliminary evidence of beneficial effects from Vishnu Sahasranam chanting. I understand that we cannot say that this study proved Vishnu Sahasranam caused all these changes because there were only one person. There was no control group, no randomization, and many things in a person's life can change over 12 weeks. So, while scientifically this is a very small piece of evidence, it is still interesting because these were not just statements such as I am peaceful. Researchers actually measured several things before and after the practice, and the numbers moved. They changed. That makes the study worth knowing about. But then I found a 2024 research paper that looked at Vishnu Sahasranam from a completely different angle. Instead of trying to measure cortisol or blood pressure, the researchers spoke to people who had been practicing Vishnu Sahasranam for many years. The study used a qualitative approach. The researchers conducted focus groups and individual interviews with middle aged practitioners who had made Vishnu Sahasranam a long term practice. And this produced what a blood test cannot give us people's stories. One of the participants said Vishnu Sahasranam helped him get through difficult periods in life. He said that when problems came, they passed more easily. He described this as his own personal experience and faith. He also told the researchers about a serious car accident. He said he had been traveling with his father, who was around 70, and other family members when they had a major accident. The car was badly damaged, but according to his account, nobody inside the car was injured. He regarded this as one of his major experience of faith in Vishnu Sahasranam. This is a very different kind of evidence from the scientific study. It is a personal testimony, and the researchers were documenting personal experiences. I think it is important to respect such experiences without turning them into scientific claims. I also found a much more recent account. In 2025, someone publicly described beginning Vishnu Sahasranam as part of a 40-day Anushtanam. They initially chanted it twice every day. Before this, they had mainly been accustomed to shorter periods of japa. The person described the 40-day practice as demanding. They had to learn the pronunciation and gradually develop the ability to recite the whole Sahasranam. But something interesting happened after the 40 days. They did not stop. They continued the chanting at least once every day, and they reported noticing several changes in themselves. They said their health had improved. They experienced more sukham or a greater sense of well being. They felt more productive. They noticed somewhat more patience. And more interestingly, they developed a great interest in studying the scriptures and understanding their duties and dharma. This is only one person's account. It has not been scientifically verified, but I found it interesting because the person was not describing a single dramatic miracle. They were describing a gradual change in the way they felt, behaved, and thought. And that is what makes the account worth considering. There are other recent discussions as well. For example, in 2026, a person who had recently begun regular Vishnu Sahasranam sadhana asked whether traditional Hindu sources mention changes in dreams, inner experiences, or unusual sensations during the practice. The responses were interesting because the emphasis was not on chasing unusual experiences. The advice was that such things, if they occur, should not become the purpose of the practice. The emphasis should remain on regularity, faith, and devotion. This is a useful perspective because spiritual practice can easily become a search for experiences, and the deeper transformation may be subtler than that. So, what do we actually know? We know that there is a published pilot study in which one person practiced Vishnu Sahasranam daily for 12 weeks and showed substantial changes in several measured outcomes. We know that there is qualitative research in which long term practitioners describe Vishnu Sahasranam as helping them deal with difficulties and giving them a sense of protection, resilience, and faith. And we have recent first person accounts from practitioners describing changes in well being, patience, productivity, and their interest in spiritual study. We don't have to decide that one kind of evidence is more important than another. A scientific measurement can tell us one thing, a person's experience can tell us something else, and a spiritual tradition may offer yet another way of understanding what happens through a practice like this. This is what makes Vishnu Sahasranam so interesting. There is still much that we do not know about what happens when a person gives the mind the same sacred words day after day for months or years. Maybe the real question is not whether Vishnu Sahasranam produces a measurable result, but what happens to a human being who remembers the divine every day. The research and personal accounts discussed here were found through digital research of published papers and publicly available online material. The scientific findings are presented with their limitations, and the individual experiences are presented as personal testimonies rather than as proof or supernatural or medical effects. Thank you.